we've been able to, I mean, we live in very different soils than, it's the Ozarks, and where we live, it's a pretty light sandy soil, but just tons of rocks and not very nutrient rich. And we've been able to take, when Andrea and I, my wife and I, started our farm, we were really, really excited about the potential for carbon sequestration and being able to heal the land, improve the land. But to be honest, we got so busy trying to turn it into a business that we did not spend a lot of time taking soil samples and those kinds of things. But we were able to, in 2013, take a set of samples on a new piece of land that we started leasing. And at the time, this is, like I said, a pretty light soil. I think the cation exchange capacity was around 10 or 11. And it's we took it from, we just got back this spring some soil samples, and we were able to increase the organic matter from around 2.5% to just under 4% over that period of time. And I really think that's a combination of the chickens and the cattle working together, and that makes it possible for us to be able to raise cattle with that. I mean, it's just, the soils are pretty, like I said, pretty. They don't have a lot of minerals, and it's just they're not very productive in the Ozarks. I would say a challenge for us is that we switched from a cow-calf operation to finishing in 2015, and it's just tough in our climate, and I think everybody faces this at certain times of year, to do a good job finishing without supplemental foraging or mowing pasture to keep it vegetative, and so it's something we're always wrestling with, is how do we keep our inputs as low as possible while also being able to keep the cattle on a very high plane of nutrition. And I think it's a common challenge, but certainly one that we wrestle with quite a bit. So.
If I remember the question, I think that I think the first part of the question was, what kind of challenges do you face, and the second part was, what are you doing about it? On our ranch, we have several different types of ground. We have a big flat called Feeney Flat, and there was, I don't know, 6 or 7 homesteads on there. So it got really, really hammered, and it was broken up into pretty small pastures, a couple hundred acres at a shot. And then we have big, 10, 12,000 acre pastures that are in pretty good shape because they're really rough. It's too rough to plow, I guess. And so they're in pretty good shape. The challenge that we have is on that stuff that has been farmed, that we have a lot of annual brome grass coming in there, and it's just beat up. And we've been working for 20 years to try to fix that, and we've done some seedings. We'd like to burn it. There's a little political problem with burning around here, but those are the things that we would like to do. That's the challenge, and what we are doing is we're trying to give each, and we got 22 pastures or something like that. And we're trying to rest at least a few pastures every year for a couple of years. So really pump up that rest period. And so, so that's what we're doing about it. We'd like to do more, particularly with the fire. But those are our challenges and some of the things we're doing about it.
So we moved to this ranch in the Passamaquoddy Valley of Idaho in '05, and it came with this 46,000 acre grazing allotment on BLM and Forest. We have some private up there as well. And this basically is a country that's been grazed in pretty much unmanaged terms for nearly 150 years. Back in the early part of the 20th century, 1920, 1930, there was upwards of 5,000 head running across this allotment. My grazing permit is for about 800. Anyway, we tried grazing about 300 mama cows up there and their calves starting in '05. And, we walked into it thinking, well, heck, we can take care of a lot of these problems. There was head cuts in a lot of these creeks that were 5 to 10 feet high, and we lost a ton of riparian plant diversity. And a lot of the adjacent uplands to these riparian areas were pretty beat out, and species were, short-term annuals like cheatgrass, and the creek bottom is Kentucky bluegrass. And we thought, dang, we could fix this just by riding horseback more often. So we rode like crazy. We rode about 4 or 5 days a week for that first summer, and we were kind of cavalier in thinking we could handle this. And we just wore shoes off horses. We wore our certain parts of our body out, and we went through tires like no tomorrow on pickups because it's all rocky volcanic soil on extremely mountainous country, and it was humbling. And you know what? We succeeded in some degree with regard to the degradation trend. I think we stopped it, and we reached a plateau, but we weren't seeing any change. There was no substantive change in the quality of plant diversity along those riparian communities. And we have 55 miles of perennial creek up there, and it's where 95% of the species up on our low desert ranges especially occur. Once we got up into the timber around 10,000 feet, well, there's quite a bit of species diversity that spreads out across that landscape. You're in timber, you get 22 inches of rainfall, but down on the low end, you're probably around 8 inches rain. So we thought, well, we got to do something different. We tried this for quite a few years with these cow-calf pairs, and the problem was, deadgummit, you ride up there and you'd only run across about half the herd in a given day because you got 70 square miles to cover is just too much on horseback. So we decided to change things up a little about 6 years ago, and we thought, hey, right then we were starting to make a connection between the wild species of plants up there. We were seeing this unique opportunity on the healthy parts of the landscape to connect those healthy plants, healthy soils that were fairly pristine with a population that was more and more interested in holistically raised food that was nutrient dense. And we thought, well, dang, maybe we're thinking about this wrong. Maybe we should keep the mama cows home and run yearlings up there, and that's probably going to cause a lot of our riparian areas to start to recover on their own because, well, we'd been running heifers up there for years, and we'd always find them on some windy ridgetop. And the thing we didn't think about was they like to travel, but more on that later. Anyway, we turned those yearlings up there. This is back in, I guess 12 or something like that. And we stuck them up there, and we figured we'd just go find them. We put them up the bottom gate at the bottom of this deal along the Salmon River at 4,000 feet. And they just put their tails up and took off. And we figured, well, they're good to go. We'll just go find them tomorrow or the next day. Anyway, after that, I roared off to town, pick up some groceries, and pushing my cart through the grocery store there. And a friend of mine kind of collides with me in the aisle. His name's Jim Martini. He's been riding up in that country for his entire life. And he bumps into my car. He says, Glenn, what are you going to do about the big dogs? And I said, the big dogs? He said, yeah, them wolves are going to eat you alive up there. He said, don't you know there's a whole den of radio-collared wolves at the next pasture you're moving into? We're currently in a 10,000-acre pasture, and we're going to move in a couple weeks up to about a 8,000-acre one, and his cattle were right across the cattle guard from that pasture. And I said, well, are you guys getting hammered? He said, we lost $25,000 just this past week alone, and we're flying in there with helicopters trying to get them suckers. So I said, we're not going to literally just feed our cattle to these wolves. We can't go up there. I called Fish and Game. They wouldn't return my calls. I called the Idaho Department of Species Conservation. They wouldn't return my calls either. So I was stumped. We just pulled out of there, and we just brought all the yearlings home, and we ended up buying a lot of organic hay that year. Pretty frustrating deal. Couldn't get any work from our partners potential partners in the government angle, and we're kind of stumped as to what to do. And we were Christmas caroling down the road that winter, and Carol and I still hadn't figured out what to do with these dang yearlings, and we wanted to run them up there, but we couldn't figure out what to do. And we're Christmas caroling at Roy and Jeannie Ellis's house down the river from us, and Roy and Jeannie, they kind of got a kind of Western decorated place. It's kind of a beautiful little log home, and well, they got a lot of that C.M. Russell hanging on the walls, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Charles Russell. He kind of chronicled life on the Great Plains, eastern Montana, out of Judith Gap country, and he was a painter. And well, I looked at a lot of these paintings, and all of a sudden it dawned on me. I said, "What dadgummit? These guys are living with their cattle. Why can't we do that?" So anyway, for the past 5 years, that's what we've been doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow, but that's how we solved it, and it did. It stopped the wolf predation. We'd been losing anywhere between 4 and 14 head a year on those mama cows and calves, and we haven't lost an animal since. And I thank God for that too, but you know, I just feel really blessed. We've been able to come home 100% with all these yearlings. Right now, today, I got 300 head up there, and my daughter's a crew boss. And we're living with them, and it's working out.
Okay, we have about 30 minutes left, so I would like to open this up to our audience to ask questions. So please take advantage of this opportunity, and we're gonna allow you to ask questions now of our panelists. Don't everybody come at once. See, if you don't, then I got to keep asking them questions.
And they're really hard.
That's right. Here we go.
Give us a break. Give us something easy, guys.
I guess what better way to start than a herd fellow to ask a bunch of young men and a real young man, y'all are talking about the regeneration of your personal properties, but what's the outlook for the regeneration of the industry? After you young men leave, how does a young gentleman like me step in and fill those shoes? Easy question.
I think the future's really bright for you guys. I mean, I think there's a whole heck of a lot more interest in what we're doing now than there was 20 years ago. Half the terms we're using here weren't even in common use 20 years ago. I think it's bright, you guys.
One of the things, and some areas do it better than others, but one of the things we haven't done as a ranch industry, I'll call it, is facilitate those generational moves between operations that don't have somebody young in the operation and young people that are out there that don't have that opportunity to go back to a ranch. I know Nebraska does a good job of mentoring, trying to help the generational transition, but most places don't. It's not an easy thing to talk about. It's not something that some people will even want to deal with. But one of the things we need to do is to try to facilitate that exact process. But that's not going to happen overnight either, or everywhere. And I would suggest if that's something you're interested in, you go out and promote yourself as being an individual that's interested in building relationship. Because I'll guarantee, and there's maybe even somebody in this room that don't have somebody young to come back to the operation that's thinking the same thing. Somehow we have to get those type people together. Don't wait for somebody to do it for you, though. Go out and advertise it in Ranch Magazine, or what if there's a certain area you're interested in, advertise it in an area. Go approach some older people in the area you're interested in, and they may not be interested, but they may know somebody that is. And and maybe I'm passing the buck because I'm the first to admit that's something we have to do. We've taken care of it in our own operation, so it's easy for me to not be as concerned about as we probably should be, say as the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. We've talked about it different times, but our plate's been really full, and that's one of the things that hasn't slipped over the edge yet. But promote yourself in an area with people. I'll just about guarantee if you get real determined, you can find some opportunities out there where you can work into an operation. I had a neighbor, one of them's a bachelor, long-time ranch operation. The other one don't have any kids coming back to the operation. They were getting tired of working, and I've been real fearful. I mean, it's a huge, really good grass operation. I've been really fearful that it's going to get converted, just like so many places have in our country. And I don't know where it's going. I don't even know what their arrangement is for sure, but they worked a deal out with a young fellow that's running some cattle on the operation, wants to get involved, is involved now. And so those opportunities are out there. I don't even know how they got together, but somehow they did. So I'd suggest promote yourself, and that's really shoving it off on you, but I'm also willing to bet if you're really interested in it, you'll get the job done.
I guess I would say, as somebody who's had firsthand experience with it, that first of all, this room is full of people my age or older, maybe some younger, that are at the point in their life when they would like to make a transition. And if you're worshiping at the altar of the almighty dollar, then forget it. Forget about bringing somebody in younger and mentoring them. You've got to have a mentality of the fact that you have built what you've got over your lifetime, and you want to see it continue, and it's not about money. And that's the first thing that you've got to address. Second thing is that they're going to make changes, and sometimes those changes aren't easy for you to. Just ask your wife if you think change is easy. Easy for her, but maybe sometimes not so easy for me. And so you've got to be willing to accept that that's what's going to take place. But I guess I'm going to put more of the burden on. I've heard too many people my age talk about, well, I'd sure like some young guy to come back and take over. And then as you talk and discuss with them and you hear what kind of options they're thinking about offering them, I can see why nobody's coming back. Not only nobody in their family, but no other young person would want to. So I'm going to really place the burden of transition on the shoulders of those of us that have got the assets. Because there are young people like this gentleman here and the one asking the question that they're out there. We have an internship on our ranch that we offer every year, and we get anywhere. This year the numbers of applicants were down, but the quality was good. But we have sometimes over 100 young people that want an opportunity to, just one of them, an opportunity to come and spend the summer on our ranch. And some of those are looking for opportunities more than just learning. And so they're out there, but those of us that hold the purse strings got to get figured out how we're going to be willing to let go a little bit.
So it's a fantastic question, something that we wrestle with a lot at Grassroots. As you know, I think everyone gets this. It's the average age of a farmer in the U.S. is around 60 years old today. Joel Salatin's constantly talking about how something like half the ag land is set to transition over the next decade or something like that. So it's obviously a problem that's looming on the horizon. A great thing is that there's sort of this budding, or it's more than budding. I mean, there's this market growing seemingly pretty quickly in areas to support a different kind of farming that I think is much more attractive to a new generation of farmers. As someone who started from zero and is a first generation farmer, I do worry sometimes that it takes like a rock star entrepreneur to get started and do this. And one of the things that we're really focused on with Grassroots is trying to to knock down some of those barriers and give, so Grassroots has, many of our farmers are actually first-generation farmers who had, were looking for an opportunity, had access to some leased land, and we had sort of a turnkey pasture poultry operation. We're actually today building more, we're getting more farmers on as I speak here right now to produce for us, to help us increase our chicken production. And it's I think that it's going to take those rock star entrepreneurs. It's going to take partnerships with existing landowners and farmers. But I also think it's going to take us, we're going to have to rethink models probably in certain ways too, to try to knock down these barriers, because, there's not a lot of outlets, meaning that it's trying to find a market to plug into. It's going to pay you a fair amount. The variabilities and the weaknesses in the value chain are pretty serious, and so those are all things that can ultimately destabilize any farmer out there. And I think those first generation farmers or younger farmers are going to be really the most vulnerable in that system. And so trying to find ways to stabilize that, I think, is going to be really important.
I think especially in grass-fed, we're in a very unique situation, and I think the responsibility for the future generation is on both sides of it. On our side, we've actually enjoyed a lot of applicants to internship programs and beginning employee programs on our ranch. This year, for instance, we had nearly 60 applicants for range rider positions. We were able to pick up 6 of them, and they're just very high quality individuals. We're very, very, very happy with them. They're up there on the range as we speak in cow camp, and they work on these shifts, and they're not only learning about this area of and capturing the vision of raising this excellent nutrient-dense protein, but they're also learning how to connect that with a consumer in our grass-fed beef direct marketing aspect of the program, because we involve them in that as well. We try to get them involved in all aspects of the operation. And some of them stay. Some of them come back in subsequent years and continue. We have one guy returning as a crew boss, actually 2 crew bosses that were riding for us the year before. So that's exciting to see. But with that, they're building this vision through experience with people like us, and they're building this vision of connecting food with the nutrient-dense origins that grass-fed culture offers. So I think it's really important to invest in these young people, because they are our future. It's just like those 28 individuals we saw earlier today. We have to invest in them, not only in terms of telling them how to get into ranching or how to do the economics of ranching, but to get that vision, to capture that vision of relationship with regard to food and the ultimate wellness of our culture. There's so many problems with health. Autoimmune disease is just one of them, and there's many, many different types of that. Christine talked about some of that today. And, we try to get every aspect of that into the culture of these kids. Then, the kids or young farmers who want to get involved, young ranchers who want to get involved, I would challenge you to just reach out. Just reach out and look for somebody to mentor you. And maybe it's even a conventional rancher. That's how we got started. 30 years ago, Carol and I knew nothing about this. We both had agricultural backgrounds, but we didn't know anything about cattle. We just reached out to an old couple that we knew we had heard through the grapevine want to retire. And we became friends with them, and we ended up buying their ranch. We worked out a deal, lifetime estate together, and they mentored us through what was traditional cattle raising, but we learned an incredible amount of knowledge from them, and that was really exciting. And as a result, we were able to build on that foundation and turn it into a sustainable twist. And so I would challenge you to just reach out and step out and find those people, because there's just so many salt of the earth, wisdom-based practitioners. A lot of them are in this room that would be happy to take on somebody to mentor and bring into this exciting world that we're heading down.
Okay, quick comment, and we'll go to our next question. You mentioned 20 years ago, what the landscape looked like, and Dan was the first to respond to your question. He said that his belief is that there is more opportunity now than there's likely ever been. I would absolutely agree with that. And 20 years ago, this conference didn't exist. And if we would have attempted it, we would have been very lucky to have gathered 10 people in a room. Now, there's not only this conference, but there are conferences dealing with pasture-based protein, regenerative ag, so on and so forth, practically every week of the year somewhere. So the opportunity for you, if you're looking into this and this is your desire, is truly greater than it's ever been. So next question.
Glenn, you said something yesterday that kind of hooked me when we were out at the 33 or near the 33 ranch, and you were talking about the health benefits and how do we communicate to consumers that we are really talking about some really serious health benefits in raising and consuming anything grass-fed. I mean, when it gets right down to it. So my question is what are you guys doing, or what are you guys thinking about? Because us being, at the very front end of this, second career ranchers, and I am, you have to have put so much thought into this. And so that's my question is, how are you communicating, like our MD here, the health benefits of what we're trying to accomplish?
Wow, that's a tough nut to crack because unfortunately, we talked a little bit about research today and science and who basically signs those checks to pay for those sorts of things. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of science-based nutritional research on the benefits of grass-fed beef. Empirical studies and scientific papers that have reached the mainstream media. Maybe there's, perhaps you could apply some conspiracy theory to this idea as to why they're not there, but they're very difficult to source those things. So that means a lot of it becomes intuitive, and so I have to go back to the thing we always use as a test for the wellness of our cattle and the wellness of the hogs we raise, the wellness of the poultry we raise, is what happened with these animals before we started dinking around with them. What was the situation that they lived under? And what system did they adapt under to achieve wellness before we started messing around with them and being connected with them and practicing our version of husbandry on them. So I basically, apply that to cattle. And so we think about, native species, stuff like diversity, like Christine was talking about today. Those things that, like cattle choice, the intuition of instinct on an animal that chooses its own forage and providing those nutritionally dense choices that an animal through an instinct can select and create wellness within an animal. So then it goes to follow logically that, in a sense, we are what we eat. And if that animal is consuming nutritionally dense, pristine soil-based or healthy regenerating soil-based forages, that in turn, the nutrition would be ours to capture as well. So that's kind of how we convey that, and it's not an easy story to tell because, again, it's just like we were talking about these potential employees and potential, practitioners of this type of agriculture. It's just gonna take capturing a vision And it takes so much time to convey that vision to our consumers. You know, the first thing we do is we try to get some beef in their mouth, you know, and we do that through various social media outlets. We tell stories, we Instagram, Facebook, we create funnels to try to capture them so that they can just taste the difference. Because, you know, the flavor resonance for a lot of us practicing this, you know, is incredible. There's an incredible difference between what we produce and what is, you know, in a supermarket. So that's a great starting point, because you know, taste and flavor and the scent and aroma of excellent food has way more staying power in the memory of our mind than some story does or something you tell them. So if you can build on that flavor foundation, then a lot of your work is already done. Then you can just build on that and give them the vision of wellness that we're trying to purvey.
So let's give our panelists a big hand.